So you might be thinking about sailing trips for this year. You might be thinking about going around Britain or going around the UK. So in this video, I'm going to be running through 10 things you might want to consider for such a trip, both for the planning and the practical part of the trip, because the planning I always think is just as important as the actual execution part of it. In June 2023, I set off in my 7 metre boat Katrina and single-handedly sailed around Britain via the Kinian Canal and came back in August. I did have a month off in between for work reasons, and I'll be running through that a little bit more in detail later in the video. But anyway, enough babble. Here's 10 things to consider for your sailing trip around Britain. Oh, the sun's come out. That's beautiful. I haven't seen that in a few weeks. Yeah, if you see me looking down, it's because I've written some of these points down on a couple of sheets of A4, so I can remember the bullet points really for each consideration. And the reason for that is because some of these are quite vast subjects when talking about this this sort of trip. In particular, you know, cost and which way round and all that sort of thing. So I've just tried to kind of like stem it down a little bit, just to make things a little bit more sharper and quicker, and engaging, more importantly. So here we go. Number one on the list I've put is, are you going to be doing this trip single-handed or with crew? So if you're solo and you're a regular solo sailor from your home port, then and you're happy with your boat and all the rest of it, then grab some charts and off you go. You shouldn't have too much of an issue. The only thing I'm going to say on the back of solo sailing is, with regard to sort of like the slightly longer 24-hour passages, you might find yourself committing to during the trip. If you're not used to that, then I would advise maybe just getting out for a few weekends where there are sort of like, you know, the slightly longer route, 24 hours, night sailing on your own, that sort of thing, just to experience that that sort of nip of tiredness during the longer trips. And the reason why you might want to do that during your trip is to, you know, make sort of progress if you're up against time, or even if you've got some bad weather forecast for your area and you know that if you stay there you're going to get stuck there for quite a good period of time. It might also be to get to a certain place before the wind changes a complete adverse direction, which is going to be holding your progress back. So there are a number of different reasons why you might, if you are solo, that you might actually end up doing that. And yeah, better to have experienced that first, I think, than actually find yourself being challenged by it, you know, whilst en route, if you get what I mean. The other part is obviously with the crew. If you're doing this with crew and you're used to your crew from day sails and trips to various places, then there's not going to be too many challenges there, other than obviously the period of time that you're going to be with those people. If they are new crew and they haven't done too much sailing in the past, you may want to have a few weekends with them to sort of iron out any ruffles that they, or issues that they have with the boat, with the sailing. It might be anything from being able to put a sheet round a winch, or helming, that sort of thing, turning on the oven, starting the engine, VHF calls, all that sort of thing. So I think sort of a few pre-trip cruises might be a good idea, sort of on the lead up to that. So there you go. Number one is the single-handed or with crew. So consideration number two is, what boat are you going to be doing this in? So if you've got a boat already, are you happy with it? Are you happy with everything like sails, rig, engine, your cooker, electronics, all that sort of stuff? Anchor gear is another one. If you've been sailing your boat for a while, then you've probably got most of these items squared away already. But all I'm going to say is, if you have a breakdown halfway through your trip, and you have to wait for a part, you might have to expect that part not to arrive for quite a long period of time. And if you're in the remote sort of parts of Scotland, it's going to be that much more difficult. Going back to what sort of boat you're actually going to do this in, if you're going to be doing it solo, then I'd say practically a boat round anywhere between 20 and 30 foot is ideal. If you're going with crew, then obviously you're probably going to want something a little bit bigger. If you've got 4 people on board and you're going around in a 25 footer, you're probably going to get on each other's nerves at some point. So yeah, I'd say maybe 20 to 30 plus for additional crew on board. If you've got a bilge keeler, you're going to potentially benefit quite a bit from that. A lot of the harbours in the north part of England and Scotland, they are drying, so you can benefit from having a bilged keeler definitely in those harbours. It saves you from coming alongside the stone walls, etc., and it also enables you to get really far up the rivers and creeks when there's bad weather about to come in, and you can dry out, and it's just and you're out of the water. So there we go. That is consideration number 2. And what boat? Okay, so consideration number 3 is which way round are you going to go? Sounds a strange question, but the prevailing winds in the British Isles are usually from the southwest, which means if you're going in a clockwise direction, like I did from Suffolk, you're going to be potentially heading into them for pretty much all of the English Channel, which is not going to be very nice at all. Hence the reason why usually it's made in an anti-clockwise direction. When I left in June, however, for the best part of 3 weeks, I had a strong northeasterly, which gave me enough to get down the English Channel all the way to Plymouth. And the reason why I went round clockwise was because I wanted to make the start of what's known as the Jester Baltimore Challenge. And it's a sail-only, single-handed challenge from Plymouth to Baltimore in Southern Ireland, which takes place every 3 years. So I wanted to make sure I was there for the start of that. It really is luck of the draw in terms of the weather. At some point, you're going to run into headwinds. I would probably say wait until you're about a week out, look at the forecasted weather, and then just decide which way around you're gonna go. You want that boost of confidence from the start, and the only way you're gonna do that is if you have a decent couple of weeks sailing at the start. Keep an eye on the weather. That's what I would say, and then make your decision which way you're gonna go around from then. Okay, so the fourth point is how long do you need to allow? So probably they're going, depending on the speed of the boat, you're probably going to be looking at anywhere between 2 to 3 months for this. And the reason why I say that is very much depends on like the route that you're taking. If you're going all the way around the sort of west coast of Ireland, you're going to be looking at potentially an extra 2 to 3 weeks as part of that trip. So the minimum really is about 2 months if you're taking the canal route through Scotland. If you're going over the top, I'd definitely add a couple more weeks onto that. So if you're going to be doing a full UK circumnavigation, you're probably looking at anywhere between 3 to 4 months. Obviously weather dependent and boat speed dependent, and an absolute minimum of 2 months. Luck of the draw with the weather again is you're totally at the mercy of the weather. You could be sort of harbour bound for maybe a week or two. It very much depends on what's going on in the North Atlantic with regard to the weather at that time. In my situation, I had planned to go over the top through the Pentland Firth. However, by the time I got to Gear and entering into the Scottish area, I looked at the forecast and thought, absolutely no chance. I'm going to get up there in good time, probably get to Stornoway, and then I'd just be storm bound for a best part of sort of a week. So as a result of that, I took the scenic route through the Caledonian Canal and then back down the other side. That's avoiding most of the weather. There was a big low pressure system at the time coming up, and it was just skimming the top of the Outer Hebrides there, and then up towards the Shetlands. So really, I didn't really fancy the option, so I went through the canal instead. Still very beautiful. A lot of people say, you bailed out on it, but I was really glad and happy to go through the Caledonian Canal instead of sitting up in the Hebrides looking at the weather forecast. the Caledonian Canal is not without its challenges. If you're going through there on your own, you'll get plenty of help. They're very, very helpful as the Scottish Canal Network staff. But just be aware that you will need some pretty long lines for going through the canal, because they are, when they let the water out, you'll end up with probably best part of sort of 15 feet sometimes above. So it's good to have some long lines there, ready to sort of like stretch out as they lower the levels. So there you go. I'd say anything between 2 to 3 months for a British circumnavigation, and sort of more looking at sort of 3 to 4 months for a full UK circumnavigation. So point number 5 is when to go. So I left at the beginning of June with the expectation of taking approximately 2 months and being back by the end of August. Obviously July I parked up in Northern Ireland and came back home for a month. The benefit of starting the trip sort of just before the longest time of the year is that you're sort of building up to it, and maximising on your sort of daylight sailing times, really, and any night sails that you do, almost sort of 3 to 4 hours of sort of twilight, if you like. It's known as astronomical twilight at that time of year. It doesn't actually get completely dark, so it's quite good to do the night sailing there as well, I think, in my opinion. They are definitely worth doing. If you haven't done too much night sailing, it's quite a nice experience to do. And also, really, you're kind of split between the worst of the weather. I think, again, it's luck of the draw. But if you're starting in June, like I did, it was actually quite cold all the way to probably that 3 weeks through to June. It was still not much more than sort of 12, 13 degrees, which was a bit unheard of, to be fair. By the sort of later part of June, it was starting to warm up a bit, especially as I was going down the south coast. And then into July, all I heard from the taxi driver on the way back to the boat at the beginning of August was how wet it had been all the way through July. And looking at the forecast, I wouldn't have made too much progress, to be honest. August, however, was really pleasant. Had a bit of a rough week at the beginning of August, heading into Scotland. But going through the canal, the weather was absolutely superb. So I was really, really lucky with that. Managed to get up Ben Nevis on at the start of the canal, which was fantastic. And then by the time I was coming down to the North Sea, the weather was actually quite favourable. There was a few. I just skipped the edge of a storm there. I think I can't remember the actual name of it now. There's so many that year. So, it just needs a little bit of consideration, the weather and where you're actually placed. So if you're coming down the North Sea, if you've got any storms coming up, you're going to expect some fairly strong headwinds on the back of them as they're heading sort of north into the northern sort of Atlantic and the Norwegian Sea. So the weather, again, I'm going to reiterate on this. It really is luck of the draw. You're going to get bad weather throughout the whole, or likely have bad weather during the summer. There's not much hope in avoiding that. But then that's sailing. So you've just got to run with it, really. The best time of the year to go, I think, in terms of favourable airs is probably more August, but then you're losing the light from the day. So it really is a bit of a balancing act as to when to go. But my advice would be anywhere between sort of the back end of May, beginning of June, and that gives you the best of the months of the summer. Number 6 is cost. So this is quite a big subject, and I think really a lot of the point here is going to be talking about marina fees, and sort of canal fees, that sort of thing. You can go into a lot of detail with regard to the equipment on board required for the trip and food, etc. But this is all stuff that if you're already a boat owner, you're going to have on board anyway. And so I'm not going to incorporate the cost side of it to that exactly. But talking about things like eating out, visits to places, that sort of thing, we're not going to include in this conversation. It's more purely down to the marina fees, which you're likely to run into. So on the south coast, I'm going to put this right out, it is expensive on the south coast. For a visitor, you're likely looking at anywhere between sort of, for a 20 to 30 foot boat, anywhere between sort of 20 to 40 pounds a night for visiting, and you are going to get the best quality, I'd say, luxury items for your stay. So things like washing, your fuels nearby, you've got laundry, etc. So yeah, decent facilities, nice pontoons, harbour facilities, bars. There's even a restaurant, the one I stayed at. So they're fantastic, but very, very expensive. That was where I stayed in the Solent, was the MDL Marina at Southsea, and that was a total cost for 2 nights for £76. So yeah, that just gives you some idea. As opposed to, let me have a look, Kinsale, 1 night is £25. So yeah, it gives you a little bit of sort of a comparison there. The further north you get, what I found was that they charge for a standard fee a minimum of, say, anywhere between 9 and 10 meters. So if I was going into, for example, I went to Lossiemouth, and that I was getting charged, I can't remember, is it £25 a night? And that was a standard minimum fee, 7 meters for the boat. So again, lovely harbour, really friendly, very straightforward, lovely clean bathroom there and everything. But don't be shocked when you come across that actually the minimum you're going to get charged is 8 meters, because invariably that's what they do. So if you're going to go around Britain in a 7 meter boat, 6 meter boat, whichever, thinking that you're going to save money by doing it that way, you will do in some areas, but not all of them. So just be prepared for that. My total cost for marina stays, and that was including the Caledonian Canal transfer, was £955, and that included a month's stay in Carrickfergus Marina in Northern Ireland. So yeah, minus that was probably about 200 quid off that. That was actually the best place to stop. Because I knew that I needed to come back for July, I actually looked at the fees for the west coast of England, sort of places like that to stop off at. I was looking at sort of places on the Clyde, but actually they came in quite expensive for a month's stay. And if you plan for a month's stay, you usually get a lot better rate than if you would be to stay there on a day-to-day basis. So if you organise that beforehand, you're going to save yourself some money there. But what I found was that the marina fees for those months were actually quite expensive in England and Scotland. So I looked at Northern Ireland and found they were much more reasonable. On top of that, to get back, getting a train back from Scotland back to sort of the southern part of England to East Anglia was significantly higher than getting a Ryanair flight from Belfast back to Stansted. So swings and roundabouts, obviously a lot faster as well. So you need to look at these things and sort of like weigh up the costs. Sometimes you think, well, we'll get a train. It's not actually always the cheapest option. So yeah, in terms of cost, a bit of planning involved there. It definitely helps to do some prep work beforehand. To give you some idea, I didn't stay in a marina every single night. That is going to really ramp up your cost significantly. To give you a rundown on the trip in general, I spent a total of 11 nights at sea. 13 nights were at anchor, 3 nights were on a mooring buoy, and 26 nights were at pontoon moorings, and that was including the Caledonian Canal transit. Now, the Caledonian Canal transit, the fee that you pay for going through includes the stays at the pontoons along the way. So you'll have pontoons through the lock on either side of the main locks, and throughout the lock system, where you can actually moor up free for the night, and there might be a very small fee in some places, but not an awful lot. So I think I paid £164 for the Caledonian Canal transit, and that gives you 7 nights free along the canal network. So my total nights there were 5 in total before I exited in the North Sea. So yeah, and that gives you access as well to showers and all the rest of it, the lock systems, etc. So one thing I'm going to add is it introduces the Kinian Canal. Now the Kinian Canal is a small canal which connects the Clyde to, I think it's the Sound of Jura on the north side, and that basically avoids having to go through the sort of Mull and Tyre and round sort of like into the Sound of Jura. Now I did look at this because the weather was quite bad, and I was looking at about 2 to 3 days delay in the Clyde. I was actually looking at going through this as an option in case the weather just didn't sort of chill out a little bit. So I phoned up the Kinian staff, and they found out that actually the costs were significantly high. For a single-handed sailor, you have to actually pay for a pilot to go through, because the locks are actually manually operated. You need to have someone on board and then someone to activate or move the locks so that you can run through them. So I think the charge was around £100 for that pilot, and then I think it was about £150 to transit. So it's actually going to be nearly sort of a third again the cost of going through the Caledonian Canal, when really the Kinian Canal is only going to take you about 2 days maximum to get through. So it's just something else to be aware of. The Kinian Canal, if you're single-handed, you're going to need a pilot on board to run through that lock system. Otherwise, they're not going to let you in, unfortunately, and you're going to go round to the Mull and Tyre. The Mull and Tyre, absolutely fine to do. I took the outside route from the overfalls and can cut in the inside. You will need to sort of time it reasonably well with the weather, because the strength of the tides through there are quite significant. Obviously, if you're in a lot bigger boat, you're going to be looking at significantly higher fees. It's worth noting as well that some places along the south coast will charge you for anchoring within the harbour area. And I will mention Salcombe here because they do have a reservation on the seabed there. So there is a small fee for anchoring overnight, which they are very, very sharp on, by the way. Within sort of a couple of minutes, you'll have a harbour boat come alongside asking you what your intentions are, whether it's to pick up a mooring buoy or to drop the anchor. So very, very busy as well. So it might be worth just phoning up beforehand just to find out if there are spaces within the harbour. So yeah, there you go. Number 6 was cost. Okay, consideration number 7. I'm putting in safety here because it should be definitely on the consideration list in terms of what gear you've got on board. If you're single-handed, if you're doing this single-handed, I can't emphasize enough making sure that you've got your harness on board and that you are attached to that harness at all times when you're sailing. Everything else after that, sort of life jackets, VHF radio, means of calling the Coast Guards, that sort of thing, absolute paramount. You can't. This is where I don't incorporate cost into this, because that sort of thing you need to have on board, irrespective. If something goes wrong out there, there's only one way you're going to be able to contact anyone, and that's if you've got cell phone signal, get on the blower. If not, you've got the DSC radio hopefully on board. You press the DSC button and then they're going to come out and give you a hand. I didn't carry a life raft on board. I did have an immersion suit, so if I had to abandon ship in the worst case scenario, I'd bung that on, get my life jacket on, and I had a PLB small satellite location beacon actually sewn into my life jacket, so if I was in the water I could fire that off and they know the exact location of me. So flares, down boys, all that sort of stuff as well. If you're crewed, then obviously it's good to have a means of getting a location out for that person to keep an eye on them. It's quite easy to lose a man overboard in a heavy sea. So Again, all that sort of stuff should be already on board. If you're going out even for the weekend, it needs to be on board. What I used to do is actually I used to have attach a big line of rope onto my life jacket, and then that was actually attached to two eyelets in the cockpit. So every time I got out of the cabin, that would be then attached to me. Actually, in the end, I was actually attaching myself before I was getting into the cockpit. And that was because of the fact that in the Jester Challenge, one of the skippers actually never arrived at his destination, and he was the boat was later found without him on board, which really put the EBGBs up me, and it definitely changed my focus on especially being strapped into the boat or onto the boat at all times. If you go overboard, the likelihood of recovery if you're single-handed is zero. So definitely 100% get yourself a decent harness and fixing points into the cockpit, and don't ever detach yourself, even in decent weather. Just leave yourself attached to the boat. So there we go, safety is number 7. Number 8, I'm going to talk a little bit about your spares inventory. I know we've touched a little bit on this already, but again, the emphasis on doing this trip is to actually complete it. If you have a split fuel line or a tear in the sail, it could be a clogged fuel filter or a blown fuse. If you haven't got anything to replace that, and to sort things out so that you can carry on your merry way, you are going to be putting a grinding halt on your progress. So definitely run through what you've got on board already in terms of your spare lists, and any small repair jobs that you need. Get some gear for it. Even if it's something like your rubber dinghy, if that starts leaking like a sieve, and have you got a little repair kit just to sort it out? Because there's no point going to these nice harbours and places not being able to row over to the shore. So some are just more of a convenience on the bias of not being able to repair a rubber dinghy or your push bike or whatever. But I think your list of spare parts for the boat, spare lamps for your nav lights, it could be fuses for your VHF, it could be fuses for your self-steering system, your tiller pilot even, bilge pump, all that sort of thing. Engine replacement parts, again, I had a few issues with my engine just coming into the Solent, and if I hadn't had a carb spray or an air duster, I wouldn't have been able to clear whatever crud had developed in my carburetor. So all that sort of thing, you just need to cast your eye over a bit beforehand, and just make a list. I definitely recommend going and finding a sail maker and having a chat with them about just essential sail repairs. You can get some pretty awesome sticky stuff now. So if you ever have any sort of minor tears in the sail or even major, you can use this sort of sticky stuff to go over it, and it's strong enough to actually build the sail back together until you can get it to a proper sail maker for repair. Spare list inventory, definitely spend the time on going through yours and restocking on anything that you think you may need during your trip.
These cows definitely don't care about how close I am to them.
Okay, food. So this is something that I sort of noticed on a few occasions, that there seems to be an abundance of co-ops around the country, and I find them absolutely ridiculously overpriced. So stock up well at the beginning is what I'd suggest. If you ever come across a Lidl or an Asda en route and it's not too much for a walk away, make use of stocking up there, because there's not as many of those types of supermarkets within walking distance from the shoreline. They'll typically stick a co-op or a Waitrose within sort of 5 minutes of the beach, and if you do need something, you're then obliged to go and shop there. So I wouldn't go absolutely mad on food before the trip, because you are going to be stopping off, and it's nice to actually sample the local produce as well, I think. So I would recommend things like doing a quick Google on the area to see where your more budget sort of supermarkets are, so you can get a decent stock up before carrying on. It's worth noting that some areas are a lot more sparsely populated than others in terms of supermarkets and supplies. For me, I had an outboard engine, so it meant walking everywhere to a petrol station to fill up when I needed to. So yeah, it's definitely worth noting when you're going somewhere is what have they got in terms of supplies. I didn't see that many chandlers, to be honest, after leaving the south coast. There probably were there, but I didn't see that many of them. I think a lot of this stuff is now going online, so it's worth just giving it a recce on Google or asking the locals, where the nearest supermarkets are and chandlers, fuel stops, all that sort of thing. So there you go. Number 9 is food. Oh, just one thing on food before I carry on. When you're underway, and if you are single-handed, it's definitely worth doing a decent meal before a night. Now, what I used to find a little bit is it's not a good idea to really bulk up or actually take in a decent meal before night draws in, because you get really, really, really tired. What I'd suggest is like eating in small amounts, or leaving it until sort of like maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So I found that fruit like grapefruit, peach slices, all that sort of thing, stock up on that before night draws in, and it gives you like a super boost of like energy. And I have no problems at all, along with quite a few cups of coffee, to stay awake. So and then as the morning comes in, I used to find that was like the real critical point in terms of like energy and being able to keep reasonably alert. Snack nuts, that sort of thing, more fruit helps to keep you sort of like a bit more alert and stop you from falling asleep. If you have a big meal beforehand, your energy is just going to go to sub-zero, and you're going to be really struggling to stay awake for that night passage. So yeah, that's just a little tip on the food side of things while underway. So consideration number 10, final point. This is going to be potentially a once in a lifetime trip for you. Doesn't matter how it turns out, make a daily blog or vlog or whatever using the video camera, take a decent camera, get some pictures out there, because the places that you'll visit are absolutely amazing. A lot of them you may never visit again. So it's good to actually look back at the trip that you've made, and also it means that you can take it back and you can show friends and family where you've been and the places that you came across, and the sort of situation that you found yourself in. So definitely worth doing, I think, that, especially your mind goes a bit muddy after a while, and in 5 years time you can look back at them and say, oh, that was amazing, and maybe give you ideas for future trips and that sort of thing. Oh, that's amazing. The sun's out again. Okay, so that's all my considerations. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry if I didn't get all of them, but please feel free to leave comments in the boxes below, and I'll do my best to answer them as I usually do. If you are planning a trip this summer, I wish you all the best, and the main thing is enjoy yourself. It's an absolute fantastic experience. I absolutely love doing it. I would do it again in a heartbeat, and definitely allow myself a bit more time. So yeah, again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more videos coming up soon. Thank you.